Are you kidding me? That now we're live. I'm so sorry. Thank you everybody for tuning in and being so patient. As you can see here, this week's installment of the hashtag Buffet Crampon Together at Home series is not just me by myself. I'm very happy to have a guest here with us. As you can see, we have Weston Sprott of the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra here, one of the trombone players of the section. Also the dean of the Juilliard Preparatory School here, and of course an Antoine Courtois performing artist. So thank you so much to Weston for being here and dealing with my faulty internet connection.
Glad to be here. Looking forward to it.
A little prior information before we get things going. This week, as you can see right now, we're doing a discussion on the Antoine Courtois Creation Series instruments. Next, on Thursday, we will be doing a discussion of the Heritage Hans Hoyer French horns with our high brass product specialist, Warren Koos. So at the same time on Thursday, so please join in then, right on the Hans Hoyer Facebook page. And thank you again for being here. So jump right into it. Weston, thank you so much for being here today. We're really excited to have you. I wish it was under better circumstances, but with everything going on and you being in kind of one of the epicenters of the country, what have you been doing to keep yourself busy through all this?
Well, I mean, obviously the performance aspect of things has changed significantly. The Metropolitan Opera, as well as all the major performing arts companies, whether it's the New York Philharmonic or the ballet or Broadway shows, all these things across the country are now currently canceled. So that's kind of off the table. Yesterday, I did a couple of master classes, one for the Orchestra now, and another yesterday evening for Indiana University. So I've kept myself busy for sure with some online teaching, both in lesson and master class format. But of course, primarily being dean of the preparatory division at Juilliard School is a very, very busy job. And so that keeps me busy for many hours a day, basically many hours, 7 days a week, because actually, as a result of all of the change that we've had to go through, there's a lot of administrative work required to make sure that things continue. So kind of managing or with a team of people that we have at Juilliard, managing the transition to music theory and ear training classes and all of our academic electives and lessons and orchestra and all these things moving into a remote learning format has been a pretty significant lift and a learning curve for a lot of people. And just considering all the other elements that go into what's happened as a result of this crisis, it's incredibly multi-layered and it affects every part of an organization, every part of every individual's life, from administrative point of view, from a health perspective, financial perspective, everything. As we know, this is kind of an all-encompassing moment that's affected every single person on the planet. So I've had no shortage of things to keep me busy. I still manage to find some sense of routine in my day. My meetings, online meetings, of course, and emailing back and forth with staff and faculty and students and things like that is segmented by, or is I should say, is supplemented by intermittent practice sessions. So I'll play 20 to 30 minutes of scales and arpeggios and lip slurs and things like that, and then sit at the computer for a couple of hours and do some work, have some lunch, repeat the cycle a couple of times, and then I try my best, if I can, to shut it down a little bit in the evening. Ride my bike. I have a Peloton, so thankfully I have some option for exercise, so that I feel like I get my body moving every day, that I'm not just eating and sitting still. And then have some dinner and try to best do something normal, like watch TV or a movie or some educational videos, things like that. So I've probably seen more Netflix in the last 3 or 4 weeks than I've seen in the last 3 or 4 years, because the traditional schedule that I carry in normal circumstances is so busy that I'm generally never home.
Yeah, I mean,
Most of the time I'm almost never at home. So I'm trying my best to see this entire time period as much as is possible, from the perspective of being a glass half full. You know,
mhm.
there's no doubt there's a lot of negatives that are happening here, but there are also some silver linings. I get to spend more time with my wife than I've ever gotten to spend with her in our entire lives. Whether she believes that's for better or worse, you can ask her. But we get to spend more time together, watch more things together, have more conversations, have more meals together than we ever have. And from a musical perspective, in some ways, it's really nice when you think about having an opportunity to hit the reset button and think about larger, big fundamental goals that you've wanted to work on without the pressure of having a performance right around the corner. There's a benefit to having performances all the time.
Yeah.
Personally, it keeps you in shape in a certain way, but there's also an element of having performances all the time where you feel like that takes away the opportunity to reinvent some things in your technique or to do a deep dive on certain things that you've always wanted to do, because you can't do those when you have to perform 4 or 5 nights every week. But if you know there's nothing on the horizon for a while, you can actually reshape your practice for a long haul growth that looks quite different.
Well, I'm glad that that seems to be one of the benefits that everybody's been able to take away from this really tragic situation, is that we have more time to do things like you said, sit at home and enjoy Netflix with your wife, and enjoy more meals together, and kind of have a different, that opportunity that we never really have to, I've heard a lot of people say, like, all of those times you wish you wanted to sit down and learn the guitar, like this is that time to do that, and different
Right.
things like that. So, um, but outside of that, it really is a bummer, a really crummy situation with everything going on. But I'm happy to hear that you're making the best of it. So as everybody here knows, and as many of the viewers I'm sure know, Weston has a really unique relationship with Courtois, being that he was one of the design collaborators for the New York tenor creation series Trombone. Um, and I really want to jump into that, but first, I think it'd be really cool to talk about Weston and his career. You're from Texas originally, correct?
That's correct. From a suburb of Houston called Spring.
Mhm. So I know that Texas is known for its really competitive, not competitive, but very large focus on the arts. So how did that help kind of, start you on the right musical path?
It is competitive. I don't no need to retract that. It's definitely a competitive environment. It's also a very fun environment. I always tell people I think the Texas Music Educators Association is probably the strongest in the country. There's so many kids in Texas that are involved in band. I think a lot of that is largely related to just how strong football culture is in Texas. If every school has a football team and there are 10,000 fans in the stands every Friday and Saturday night for these games, it only makes sense that they have a really strong marching band program, which then feeds concert season and feeds the feeder schools, the junior high schools. And so it's really common for all of these schools to have really large programs. The high school that I went to, we had 5 bands, 4 orchestras, and 3 choruses, if you can believe it. We were a large 5A high school, which at the time that was the largest classification for high schools. We had around 3,500 students, something like that, at our high school, and I would guess that about 1,000 of them were involved in music in some way or another, and that involvement in music had a constant flow of competition, whether that was region band, region orchestra, all area, all state, individual chair test in school. I think we might have had, within our bands, maybe 5 or 6 chair tests per semester. So there was always this kind of driving thing pushing you, and a lot of successful musicians, particularly brass players, have come out of that Texas tradition of band playing. So yeah.
And so in being involved there, uh, where did you continue your studies after that? You went to Indiana, correct?
Yeah, when I graduated high school, I went to Indiana for 2 years to study with Carl Lenthy. That's part of the connection. One of the reasons why I ended up teaching a master class there last night, because that's a connection that I've maintained for years. I had a great experience there. It's a great school. And after that, I transferred and did my final 3 years of school at the Curtis Institute of Music, studying with Nitzan Horowitz, who's a principal trombonist of the Philadelphia Orchestra. And then I had the very good fortune, very good timing of getting the position at the Metropolitan Opera actually on my last day of school. It was literally the last Friday of the semester back in 2005, and so that's kind of my basic performance career trajectory. Of course, there were some other things that happened in between, but
Yeah,
those are some of the big picture items.
it's a big change from Indiana to Curtis. Was there something specific you were looking for, or was it just like a different kind of, like a city or anything like that, or anything like that, or?
It was a massive change because as most musicians in the United States will know, Indiana University is one of the absolute largest music schools in the country. At the time, I think we were about 1,600 students, and Curtis is basically the smallest music school in the country. It was like 150 or 160 students total. For me, I was very clear about what my goals were. I really wanted to play in a first-rate, world-class orchestra. That's what I wanted to do. And I felt like having that degree of proximity and regularity to hearing a truly world-class orchestra was something that I really valued having in my education. And Curtis was a place that offered that opportunity pretty uniquely. Uh, Being able to hear the Philadelphia Orchestra every single week, be at a school that's literally right down the street. And it was what happened with that situation, or my decision to transfer to Curtis, was really much more about how highly I felt about Curtis more so than anything else. I didn't audition to transfer to any other school, so it's not like I was looking for my way out. At the time, Curtis, it's not the case anymore, but Curtis had an age restriction back then, where you had to be under 21 in order to audition. So there was an opening at Curtis. I thought this is a very unique school, and if I want to have an opportunity to go, this is the one chance that I will have. You know, there was no option to consider waiting and going to Curtis for grad school. So I thought, if I want to have this experience, have an opportunity, I have to go for it now. And I was very fortunate that it worked out, and that's where I ended up.
That's awesome, and obviously it paid off with getting the sweet gig you got with, as school was closing. So that's awesome. Um, and with that being in different schools, you do a lot of teaching as well, right? As you said at the beginning, you've been doing a lot of online lessons. And being dean of the preparatory school at Juilliard, I assume the teaching schedule keeps you just as busy as the playing ones do.
That's actually changed pretty dramatically this year. I For the last several years, my teaching schedule has been extremely heavy. I was teaching, well, I'm still teaching at Bard College, but I was previously head of the department at Manus and was carrying several students in a class there. So I was teaching like a brass pedagogy class and sometimes a brass rep class, low brass class, in addition to private students. Also teaching at Rutgers. And that was a really great experience. I love teaching. I have a real passion for education and helping people. And then this year, when I took on the position as Dean of Preparatory Division at Juilliard, it simply was the case. There's only so many hours in the day. Because the position at Juilliard is a really full-time position, and it really requires all of the attention that you can give it. The students are deserving of someone who's really focused and is not distracted in a million different directions. And so that meant that some things were going to have to go. So I've removed myself from or resigned from Manus, and I'm also resigning my position at Rutgers just to create the amount of space that's necessary. And I've also reduced to some degree the amount of playing that I was doing at the Met. We have some built-in flexibility in our schedule. I was actually for many years playing more than was required of me, and now I've peeled it back to just doing what is required. So I guess you could say now I'm only playing 4 operas a week, which is still a crazy amount. But between doing four opera performances a week, of course, during the times when we're actually performing, and that's not the case at this particular moment in time, but under normal circumstances, performing 4 operas a week, a couple of rehearsals, and then working at Juilliard. So those days are very busy. It's not uncommon for me to have days where I get up in the morning and I spend my first 90 minutes or so of the day doing warm-ups and returning emails, going to rehearsal from 10:30 to 1:30, in the office from 2:30 to 6:30, and then back into the Met building for a performance from 7:30 to 11, and then repeat. And then Saturdays are even longer because programs for Juilliard, the programs that I'm the leader of, are Saturday programs, and so those days can be incredibly full, starting at 8:30 in the morning and finishing at midnight.
Mhm. That's yeah, that's a busy schedule. Even you say only 4 operas. For most, that's an unbelievable load, and to take on the Juilliard stuff is awesome. Um, so you having a really cool relationship with Courtois. There's a lot of kids growing up today that don't necessarily know Courtois from the get-go, or will be, introducing it to them, or at shows like TMEA or the Midwest Clinic. When did you first come in contact with the brand?
It's hard to put a date on it. My memory is a little bit blurry, but I would guess it was probably 7 or 8 years ago
Mhm.
was the first time I came in contact with the brand. Well, I should say the first time I became pretty intimately aware of the brand and what the instruments were like. Of course, I had heard of the brand for a long time, and it was Courtois trombones were played more in Europe.
Yeah.
For example, Jorgen van Rijn is someone that I've admired forever and ever and ever, and I knew that he played these instruments and that other people were playing them, but it was never something that was incredibly popular in the United States as a trombone that a lot of players here would play. And so I think the aesthetic of the instrument at that time was not built in a way that would be appealing to the vast majority of American players. And there was there was a there was a time when they came and did a presentation for trombones for a lot of college professors in New York. I remember there was like a meeting of maybe 10 to 20 college professors at the buffet showroom. At the time, it was in a different location,
Yeah.
so that dates it a little bit. And I went and tried out the horns, and people were asking me, "What do you think of these instruments? Something that you would want to play?" And to be quite honest, to tell the evolution of how this all came to be, I played the horns, and I said, "You know what? I'm not. This doesn't really suit what I want to do." And I've never been one of those people that says I'm just going to play an instrument because I want to get an endorsement or have my name connected to something. I need something that I can really feel good about playing. And so I said, you know what, this doesn't work for me. I think it would be better if these particular things were parts were considered in the design of the instrument. If you guys ever decide to do that, give me a call back, and I'd be happy to try them again. And I just kind of left and went on back to my life as usual. I didn't really think much of it because oftentimes when you have conversations with companies like this and you say, why don't you completely rethink the way that you're designing an instrument, people aren't interested in that. But to Courtois' credit, they came back not that much later, maybe a year or two later, and they said, "Hey, we have something that's pretty different here, and that takes into account some of the things that you mentioned. Would you be willing to try again?" And so I went back. I believe Paul Pollard and I both went back actually, and we tried out the horns that they had designed, and we said, "You know what? This is really, really close. This is moving in the right direction. This is something where we feel like, we're starting now with a baseline where from here we can really tailor make something that's going to be great and that people are going to like and that we will feel comfortable playing at the Metropolitan Opera all the time." And so that's when the relationship really started to develop, and we started making different tweaks to what happens if we change the venturi and the lead pipe, and what happens if we move a brace from here to there, what happens if we cut the bell, what should the weight of the ring be, should we be using what types of tuning slides should we be using, what weight of slide, all these different things, because we're actually close enough that we felt we could start doing, I don't even know if I should call it detailed work because those are big picture items, but we felt like we had a baseline to work from, that we felt confident we were going to get to the finish line with something we felt really, really good about. So that's when that started. And I would guess probably 4 or 5 years ago, maybe it was even a little bit longer than that, maybe 5 years ago, we both came to a product where we felt like, oh, this is really great, and we can feel comfortable playing this in the orchestra and on solo recitals. It's a really versatile instrument that works really well. It's something that we can feel comfortable recommending to our students. It's something we can stand by, and Paul will tell you this too. We have this experience quite often. We have students who are new to a school. They're coming into a new ecosystem, and they're excited about having the opportunity to take music very seriously, and they want to get a new instrument. And I think one of the most rewarding experiences for us is that we never have to push our instruments on students. At least I don't. I shouldn't speak for anyone else, but I know I never do. Students ask me about my instrument. Sometimes we'll be in a lesson and they'll play their instrument and they say, "I'm thinking about getting something new, whatever." And I'm say, "Hey, why don't you try this? Just try my horn for a few minutes." And they go, "Oh my gosh, that's way, way better than what I'm working with. Should I get one?" And I always say, sure, if you want to get one, you should, but no pressure to do it. Or, better yet, what you should do is we could do a blind test of instruments. So why don't you go to whatever store it is or make some orders, and why don't you get 3 or 4 different brands, and we'll blind test these. Not just me, but maybe bring some of your other classmates or colleagues in, and we'll do it. And this instrument wins like every time. And that's, I think that's really useful because it doesn't become a situation where where students feel like I have to play this instrument because my teacher plays this instrument and they said it. It's a situation where the students feel like they're making a decision for themselves and based on the evidence and based on what people, the way that people respond to them, not just their teacher, where there can be some feeling of coercion or, I have to do something to satisfy my teacher. They have to pick a different instrument. They almost all pick this. I think by the time I was leaving Rutgers this year, I think all of my students were playing one of these instruments, and it was all their choice, and they will all tell you as sincerely, with complete sincerity, none of them, I don't think I mentioned to any of them that they should switch,
Mhm.
and I don't think that I told them what they should switch to. I just let it happen organically. It's almost like the quality of the product speaks for itself.
That's awesome. That's there's always these horror stories we hear about, a teacher being overly forceful about, pushing one thing on a student or anything like that, and to have that really organic approach to all of your students coming to the instrument. That's really cool to hear about. To jump into the comment section just briefly, we have a couple people to say hi to. A lot of the buffet family is all saying hi. Big shout outs from Chris Coppinger and Al Maniscalco, Lori Orr. Doug Beavers is here, another Antoine Courtois performing artist. He plays on not one of the New Yorkers, but the 402 TRR, the Extreme Jazz Series. So, hey, Doug, we're glad you're chiming in.
What's up, everybody?
Oh, Marcia Bendrano as well. Hi, Marcia. Another Courtois artist, a big fan of the 440. So happy to see this large engagement from everybody. And remember, everybody, if you have any questions, please chime in at any point in the comment section. We're going to do our best to answer these as we go along and fit them in where we can. To get back to the New York Creation Series a little bit. So what was it like to design the first one? So you said they came back about a year later after that showroom visit and with some tweaks. What was it like to go from those little bit of tweaks to what became the first Creation Series?
If we're talking about the series that wasn't yet the cut bell,
Yeah, correct.
I remember a lot of that had to do with brace placement
Mhm.
and the way that which slides we wanted to use, whether or not we were actually using sleeves or not, the crook that we wanted to use, and also the shape of the lead pipe, the way that we were going to deal with. Actually, those were the main things. Actually, it wasn't actually a crazy rework. Even so if you looked at the instrument that they brought to us originally at that time versus what we decided to come up with a handful of months later after working on it, you wouldn't look at the instrument and go, "Oh my gosh, this is some massive difference where I can see this and see that." We were really working on much more subtle things, which is actually one of the reasons why I think it made it an interesting project for us, because when you have an incredibly busy schedule to feel like you have to take something from the 1 yard line on the opposite end of the field all the way down, as a full-time professional artist, it's difficult to make time for that. But if you feel like someone's already got you in the red zone, then you feel like, yeah, I can definitely use my expertise here to kind of punch this in and make a score. And then not that long after that, going towards the second version, Paul and I, we just recognized that the industry was moving towards cut bells,
Mhm.
and we needed to find a way to make that work. Personally, just the amount of travel that we do, being there was a point in time where I'd be on a plane flying to a different place every couple of weeks, and during the summer, there are times I'm on the road for 10 to 12 weeks straight, going from one festival to the next. And it's just nice to know that you have an instrument that can fit in the overhead compartment of any plane or in the overhead compartment on a bus. When you have a cut bell, you're less concerned about your bell flare getting crushed. And of course, the overwhelming concern was how can we make a cut bell instrument that retains the sound quality and ease of playing that you have when you don't on the uncut bell. That's really what we were going for. So I think with the original instrument that we came up with, we were already incredibly happy with the way we played. The question was, how can we get that quality of playing out of a cut bell instrument? And also, how can we create a high level of consistency from the instrument? So, oftentimes what'll happen with a lot of companies is you'll have a premier artist who's playing an instrument, and their instrument seems to play a little bit better than everyone else's because their horn has got all these little tweaks and special things. And finding a way to develop consistency from instrument to instrument was a big thing. First, finding out how to make a cut bell horn that would play as well as one that's uncut, and then finding a way that you can produce 10 or 15 instruments and feel like they all play with a similar degree of quality. You don't pick up one horn and feel like, oh, this one's better than the other one, or you have to find a good one, but they're all good. And over time, with these tenor trombones, we were definitely able to figure that out.
Um, and for those tuning in, some people may not know what we've been talking about is the New York creation model that we have that you'll see today with the cut bell is somewhat of the second generation of that instrument. We had a model that was still the New York creation series that was meant to be different as Weston was saying from our similar horns in terms of the 420 Legend series line. The cut bell and the Marcus Bona style flat case and everything like that really show off the second generation of that instrument and kind of a different approach to it overall. So there's a lot of history to that instrument, and it's cool to hear it from the man himself, especially to hear a lot of questions we get at shows are, why did you do this, or was there something you needed to fix, or anything like that, and it never really seemed that way. It was just to try and get something different, to as you said, for traveling and to get a cut bell where the industry is the trombone world has really been leaning towards for a little while now. And a couple questions here. We have one from Bill Harris. What mouthpiece does Weston use?
I'm using an Alessi Griego Alessi 5B mouthpiece. That's where I'm at now. And what's interesting about the Mouthpiece Journey is I've played almost every size of mouthpiece that's practical for an orchestral tenor trombone player. When I started at the Met, I was playing a Doug Elliott mouthpiece that was around the size of a 5G. And over the course of the years, my playing was developing in a different way, and I kept going to larger and larger rim sizes. There was a point in time where I was doing a larger rim probably I was doing a half size larger every 6 months. So I went from 5, then I play a 4.5 for 6 months, then I play a 4, then a 3.5, then a 3, then a 2, and I eventually got down to playing a 1G rim with a 5G cup, which some people think is insane, but that's what I was doing. And if you go on YouTube, there's a video of me playing at Slide Factory, this trombone festival that gets done in Rotterdam. I'm not sure if they still do it or not. Back in 2013, I'm doing Brahms for Serious Songs and Ravel Don Quixote Dulcinea, and that recording is on a 1G rim with a 5G cup. And then over time, my playing and the way that I approached the instrument evolved again, and it actually made sense for me to start moving back. So I started incrementally moving back, and now I'm back almost to where I started. So I've had a lot of experience with experimenting with mouthpieces and understanding the different ways that you need to play depending on what type of equipment you're using, and also recognizing different positives and negatives of different equipment. So I've done the whole spectrum, but this is where I'm at now, and I have a pretty good feeling that I'm going to be with this for a while. I've been playing this mouthpiece setup for probably 3 years now, and it's about as comfortable as it's ever been. I think I'm more established in the way that I believe playing from a physical perspective should happen than I ever have been. So I don't expect that I'll be changing in such dramatic fashion moving forward.
Another really cool question from actually a good friend of mine, and I think you may know him as well, Stephen Wimple.
Oh yeah, what's up, Stephen?
Stephen's asking, would you be able to talk about the choice of using the Hagman valve over axial flow or rotor valves in the design process of this horn? That's a great question, Stephen. Weston, what's your take on that?
My take, I don't have a ton of experience with the rotor valves. Actually, that's not true. My first experience with a large bore trombone was playing a Bach 42 with a rotor valve. And then my next experience was that I was playing in Edwards with a Thayer valve or axial flow valve. My experience with this is that I feel like the Hagman valves actually feel more even when you go from one to the next. I always had the experience that the rotor valves felt like when you went into the trigger, it suddenly felt tighter, or like there was more back pressure than you were accustomed to. And then on the other extreme with the Thayer valves, I felt that when you use those, it was suddenly much more almost artificially open, and it required a completely different feeling. When I'm using the Hagman, I feel like both sides of the horn feel somewhat similar. Of course, I'm not going to suggest that they're exactly the same. There's no difference between playing in one or the other, but it's such a subtle difference that it doesn't bother me at all. And I also think the amount of resistance that it creates in the instrument, even when you're not engaged in the valve, feels more comfortable as well. So that's for me. That's the reason why I've enjoyed these valves more than the others.
Awesome. And okay, Mouthpiece. More quick questions here. Uh, All right, here's a video of the Weston. Oh, yeah, very cool. We were able to post the video we were just talking about on the chat, so that's awesome. So I hope everybody tuning in can view that once we're done with this. Some people might not know is that the New Yorker comes in two configurations. The main difference between the two is either having a yellow brass or a rose brass bell. The difference between those two metals is really just a larger copper content in the rose bell, and when you put the two up side to side, you'll see that reddish tint in the rose brass bell. Weston, which one do you use most of the time?
I use the yellow bell probably 99% of the time, but I think there are benefits to both, or there are positive characteristics that both have. But because the vast majority of the work that I do is playing in the orchestra, I feel like the yellow bell seems to project more easily. It's also a little bit more, I should say, it's a little bit more one-dimensional in tone color, which in some ways is a positive thing when you're playing second trombone or even principal trombone sometimes in an orchestra. It's also because the vast majority of orchestral players, at least in this country, play yellow bells. It makes it much more easy to fit in with what's happening. Your sound can blend more easily with other people. And if you have a decent control of softer dynamics, you can control the fact that the instrument is not projecting in this, or that the instrument is projecting more than the rose bell. The places where I find the rose bell to be most effective for me are in cases when I'm doing solo playing, or in particular, chamber music playing. Brass quintet is one thing, but even more so than that, on the handful of times when I've done recitals that are where I'm doing chamber music with strings or with woodwinds, I find that to be a real lifesaver to have the rose bell, because it provides a great variation of color. The sound is a little bit warmer and more broad, and it projects. The sound feels like it goes this way a little bit more than it goes this way. And when you're playing with string players, especially if you're doing like a trombone and string quartet recital or something like that, which I've done a couple of times, it's just so easy to absolutely feel like you're covering everybody, even when you're playing mezzo piano, and to feel like you can still play in a comfortable way, and your voice doesn't distract from the contributions of the other members, is a really valuable thing to have. Otherwise, you're sitting back there trying to play piano all the time and always scared that you're covering people. I had one experience. I was doing a festival in Memphis years ago, probably 5 years ago, and I did some things with trombone and string quartet, and I was playing the yellow bell, and it went really, really well. I felt really good about it. And then I listened to the recording, and I went, "Oh my God, I just completely covered everybody." Like, oh my gosh, I felt kind of ashamed, and so that was one of those things where you get that feedback from the recording, and you go, you know what, I have to make an adjustment here so that my instrument suits what's happening in the context of the ensemble.
Cool. That's one of the questions we get a lot. At ATW and Midwest Clinic and TMEA is we'll try to put the rose bell next to the yellow bell, and it's so hard to hear sometimes the differences in those shows. And a lot of people will ask where, in what settings do they think one would use the other one, and it really, a lot of times it comes down to either like some sort of personal preference, well outside of just the different sounds that they make as the different materials.
Yeah, I think it depends on where you're going to find yourself performing or playing most often. If, in my position, because I'm so often playing in an orchestra, a yellow bell makes sense for me. If my primary job was teaching and playing chamber music or doing smaller things, smaller ensemble things, I would probably use the Rose Bell more often, but 9 times out of 10 when I'm performing, or it's like probably 95 times out of 100 when I'm performing, I'm sitting near the back of an orchestra and I need to have something that's going to suit that particular space. I think for most people, when they try these instruments back to back, the ear is generally going to lean in the direction of saying, I like the Rose Bell.
Yeah.
Just on its own, people are going to go, wow, this is a really pretty sound. It has a lot of variation of color. I can do all these different things with it. But the problem with that is if your primary outlet for performing is playing in an orchestra, you're going to sit in a section with two other people who are playing yellow bells, and you're sitting 50 feet away from the conductor and another 40 or 50 feet away from the audience, maybe even further than that. And you're going to have the experience that people out there feel like they don't hear you quite as well. Unless, of course, everyone else in your section is also doing the same thing, and then you're creating a different tonal atmosphere. But if it is the case where you're playing in a major American orchestra, the large majority of players in major American orchestras right now are playing yellow bells, and so you want to make sure that you're coming with equipment that allows you to fit the acoustic aesthetic of what's happening in that space.
It's really cool to have the perspective of somebody who's playing on both, you know, one more so than the other most of the time, but still has a really solid feeling for both of them. We have a couple people chiming in. Dan Morris, who's a big Courtois a lover. He plays on a 551, for those who know the Paul Pollard based New York creation model, as well as the 420 Michel Bouquet model. So thanks, Dan, for chiming in. He's also Lyndon Chapman chiming in, saying hi from London. Thank you so much for chiming in, Lyndon. We appreciate it. Any small questions here? Some chit chat about a creation alto. Nothing to say at the moment about that, but for those that aren't aware, we have a phenomenal the AC 131 as well as the AC 131R with a half-step trill valve on it. That's available if you'd like to check that out online, and I believe my email has been placed into the comment section somewhere. So if anybody has any alto trombone questions, please feel free to shoot me that, and I'll happy to talk about that with you. Any other questions we have here so far? It doesn't look like it. So yeah, right now, but thank you so much for Weston. We're pretty much close to the end of the hour, so we really appreciate you being here. I apologize to Weston and everybody here for the technical difficulties we had at the beginning. I think like most people sitting at home, I'm burning through internet like there's no tomorrow, and there may have been a little issue there. But thank you so much for everybody for dealing with that and being patient and chiming in with your comments and questions. Thank you so much to Weston to being here. Your insight on not only the trombone world, but these instruments is phenomenal. And we wish you nothing but the best, and hopefully you can get back to playing in the orchestra soon, so we can get out of this situation. And please stay safe in one of the epicenters, of course.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me. It was fun to have this conversation with you and everyone else out there. Hopefully we can do it again sometime. And I'll just tell everybody out there, try your best to stay positive. Try to find the silver linings in everything that's happening at the moment. Try to think of different ways that we can embrace the challenge that we're in, and that we can look forward to a different time. One thing that I've shared with a lot of people throughout conversations I've had with some of my friends is there are varying ways to view the current moment that we're in. I think some people are going to be looking at this from the perspective of, let's just wait this out until things get back to normal. Let's just kind of stand pat and see what happens, and then we'll get back to normal one day from now. And then I think there's going to be another group of people, the more successful people, who are thinking, how can I take advantage of what I'm learning? How can I take advantage of what I'm gaining from dealing with this challenge, and then leverage that so that when we actually do come out of this, whenever that is, 6 months from now or longer, who knows what it's going to be. I don't want to make any predictions because it's just impossible to say. But whenever that time is, how will I leverage what I've learned during this time to make sure that when we get back to normalcy, I'll be that much stronger, that much better, that much smarter, and ready to move into the, as Mark Cuban would say, America 2.0.
Um, that's awesome. We actually had one last little question in there that was really cool from Chris Coppinger. Can you discuss the blow between a closed wrap and an open wrap trombone?
I think actually, the difference in blow between a closed wrap and an open wrap trombone is somewhat analogous to what I was describing when we were talking about the difference between a rotor valve and the Hagman valve. I think the closed wrap instrument feels a little bit tighter, has a little bit more back pressure. That's not necessarily a negative thing. Some people prefer that,
Mhm.
and everything is, there's a spectrum. You can go too far in any direction. An instrument can be too tight, an instrument can be too open. So it's really just a matter of personal preference. It seems like the majority of players in this country, at least, tend to prefer something that's more on the open side. I think maybe the style of pedagogy that we have in this country, or just the aesthetic of playing that we have, leans more in the direction of playing open wrap instruments.
Mhm. Very cool. And thank you so much. I think we're gonna close everything up for now, and thank you everybody for chiming in. For just a quick reminder, on Thursday of this week at 2 p.m., we're going to be doing a Hans Hoyer discussion of the Heritage French Horn Series, which will be on the Hans Hoyer Facebook page. That will be hosted by my fantastic colleague, Warren Koos, our high brass product specialist. Please chime into that, as it's going to be another great discussion as we keep this series going. So please continue to chime in and ask questions. We really, really appreciate it, and we love the feedback from everybody. So thank you so much to everybody. We'll see you next Thursday. Thank you. And thank you to Weston so much.
See you later.
Yeah.